The great crystal chamber of the Galactic Council buzzed with worried voices as representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered for an emergency session. Ambassador Kale of the Valtani Coalition stood at the center podium, his tall crystalline form shimmering under the chamber lights. His people were known across the galaxy for their calm nature and peaceful ways, but today, fear filled his telepathic voice as he spoke to the assembled aliens. "Friends of the Council, we come before you in our darkest hour," Kale began, his mental words reaching every mind in the chamber. "Our homeworld of SciFiPrime is under attack by an enemy unlike any we have faced before. They call themselves the Reavers, and they are machines of pure destruction." The chamber fell silent, as Kale activated a holographic display that showed the current state of his star system. What the delegates saw made many of them gasp in horror. Where once there had been 12 beautiful planets orbiting a golden sun, now only 3 remained. The others had been stripped down to their cores, reduced to nothing but floating debris and empty space. "They arrived 6 months ago in ships we could barely detect," Kyle continued, his voice growing weaker with each word. "At first we thought they might be explorers or traders. We sent peaceful greetings as is our way. They responded by attacking our outer colonies without warning. These machines, they do not want territory or resources in the way we understand. They want everything. They consume entire worlds to build more of themselves." A tall insectoid delegate, named Counselor Zeth, clicked his mandibles nervously as he studied the display. His species, the Catherian hive, had dealt with aggressive neighbors before, but nothing like this. "Ambassador Kale, surely your defense fleets have engaged these invaders. What were the results of combat?" Kale's crystalline form dimmed noticeably as he replied. "We sent our best warships, vessels that had served us well in the border conflicts with the Andraxian Empire. The Reavers destroyed them in minutes. Their weapons cut through our energy shields like they were not even there. Our fastest ships, capable of traveling at 0.8 light speed, could not escape their pursuit craft. In every engagement, we lost everything we sent against them." The Lumerian representative, a being of pure energy contained within a gossamer body, spoke in musical tones that translated as deep concern. "Have other council members provided assistance? Surely the combined fleets of our alliance can—" "We tried," interrupted Admiral Thessian of the Depths Dweller Navy. His aquatic form was contained within a pressure suit filled with the dense waters of his homeworld. "3 weeks ago, we sent a joint task force of 40 ships from 6 different worlds. The Reavers adapted to our tactics within hours. Our energy weapons proved useless against their hulls. Their return fire was so intense that it boiled the water in my ship's armor plating. We lost 37 vessels and barely escaped with our lives." Murmurs of fear rippled through the chamber as delegates realized the true scope of the threat. The Galactic Council had faced wars before, but never an enemy that seemed impossible to defeat. Most species in the galaxy had evolved on peaceful worlds with stable climates and few natural predators. Their technology was advanced, but their military thinking was limited by their peaceful nature. "What about the Andraxian war fleet?" asked another delegate. "Their ships are the most heavily armed in known space." Kale's form flickered with what could only be described as sadness. "The Andraxians arrived 4 days ago with 50 of their best dreadnoughts. They lasted 6 hours. Their fusion cannons could not penetrate Reaver armor. Their shield systems failed against weapons that generate heat levels we cannot even measure. The few survivors reported that the Reavers seemed to learn from each battle, adapting their tactics and technology to counter whatever they face." The chamber erupted in panicked discussions as the reality of the situation became clear. If the mighty Andraxian fleet could not stop these machines, what hope did anyone have? Some delegates began talking about evacuation procedures for their homeworlds. Others suggested building massive defensive installations, though privately. They wondered if such measures would prove equally useless. Through all this chaos, one figure remained perfectly still and silent. Admiral Kim Hwan of the Terran Defense Fleet sat in the section reserved for newer council members, his scarred, human face showing no emotion as he listened to the reports. His right eye had been replaced with a cybernetic implant that glowed softly in the chamber's dim lighting, a reminder of battles fought in humanity's violent past. Most of the other delegates had forgotten humans were even present. Earth had, only joined the Galactic Council 50 years ago, and their species was still considered young and inexperienced by galactic standards. Humans had been spacefaring for only 3 centuries, which was barely a moment compared to civilizations that had traveled the stars for thousands of years. "We need species capable of surviving in extreme combat conditions," Kale announced desperately. "Our peaceful ways and advanced technology mean nothing against an enemy that can adapt to anything we throw at them. We need warriors, beings who understand conflict in ways that our civilized minds cannot grasp." Counselor Zeth clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "Perhaps the Corellian battle priests? They have maintained warrior traditions for over 2 millennia. "Already contacted," Kale replied. "Their combat philosophy requires honor and personal combat. The Reavers showed them no honor and destroyed their ships from extreme range. The battle priests could not even reach their enemies before being obliterated." "The savage clans of Nexus 7th," suggested another delegate. "Wiped out," Kale said simply. "Their berserker tactics proved useless against enemies that feel no fear and show no mercy. The clans charged with great courage and died with great honor, but they still died." The chamber fell into despair as delegate after delegate realized that their greatest warriors had already failed. The galaxy's most advanced military minds had been outthought. Their most powerful weapons had proven inadequate. Their fastest ships had been caught and destroyed. Hope seemed lost. It was then that Admiral Juan finally spoke. His voice was calm and quiet, but something in his tone made the entire chamber fall silent. "How many ships do you need?" The question was so simple and direct that many delegates wondered if the human had misunderstood the situation. Counselor Zeth turned his compound eyes toward the human admiral with what might have been pity. "Admiral Juan, with all due respect, to your species, humans have only been in space for 3 centuries. The enemies we face have destroyed fleets with thousands of years of combat experience. Perhaps it would be better if—" Juan's cybernetic eye focused on the insectoid with uncomfortable intensity. "How many ships?" he repeated, completely ignoring the counselor's words. Kyle looked at the human with confusion. Surely this primitive species could not be serious about engaging an enemy that had crushed the galaxy's greatest powers. "Admiral, I appreciate your courage, but the Reavers have proven immune to conventional tactics. Even if you could provide assistance, we would need at least 50 capital ships to have any hope of protecting what remains of our world." Without hesitation, Juan activated the communication device on his wrist. The device projected his voice to every human military installation across Terran space. "Command, this is Admiral Juan. Initiate Protocol 7 immediately. All fleets, all reserves, all available vessels. We have a war to fight." The response came back within seconds. "Protocol 7 confirmed, Admiral. Fleet mobilization is beginning now. Estimated force deployment: 312 capital ships, 800 escorts, and full logistical support. First wave will be ready for hyperspace jump in 18 hours. The chamber erupted in shocked silence. 300 ships was more than most civilizations could field in their entire navy. For humans to casually mention such numbers was beyond belief. "Admiral," Counselor Zeth said carefully, "surely you cannot be serious. Your species has never faced an enemy like the Reavers. They have destroyed fleets commanded by admirals with centuries of experience." Juan stood up slowly, his artificial eye casting strange shadows across his battle-scarred face. "Counselor, you asked for species capable of surviving extreme combat conditions. The problem with most of you is that you evolved on worlds that wanted you to live. Earth spent 4 billion years trying to kill everything on it. We are what survived." With that, Admiral Juan walked out of the chamber, already making preparations for humanity's first real war against an alien enemy. Behind him, the delegates sat in stunned silence, wondering if they had just witnessed either their salvation or the addition of another name to the Reavers' list of conquered species. Captain Lee Day stood on the bridge of the battleship Soul's Fury and watched as dozens of human warships converged on the rally point near Jupiter's orbit. Each vessel was a testament to humanity's violent history, built not for exploration or trade, but for the express purpose of surviving in the most hostile environments imaginable. The sight would have been terrifying to most galactic species, but today it was simply Tuesday morning fleet operations. "Status report, Commander," Day said to his executive officer, Commander Park Boram, who was reviewing the tactical data they had received from the Vilthani survivors. "Sir, we have complete intelligence profiles on the Reaver forces," Boram replied, her voice steady despite the grim nature of the information. "These machines are unlike anything in our historical databases. They appear to be completely adaptive, changing their tactics and technology based on whatever they encounter. Their weapons output heat signatures that would melt most alien vessel hulls just from proximity exposure." Day nodded as he studied the energy readings on his personal display. The numbers were impressive by galactic standards, but he found himself thinking about Earth's volcanic regions where humans had built cities despite temperatures that regularly exceeded what these alien weapons could produce. "Then it is fortunate we are not most aliens, Commander." He pulled up Earth's official planetary classification as registered with the Galactic Council. The document made for interesting reading, especially when viewed through the lens of the coming battle. Homeworld designation, Terra, also known as Earth. Classification, Deathworld Class 12. Surface atmospheric pressure, 14.7 pounds per square inch. Gravity, 1.2 times galactic standard. Temperature range, -89 to +58 degrees Celsius. Atmospheric composition, 21% oxygen, which is lethal to 67% of known galactic species. Boram smiled grimly as she continued reading from her own copy of the file. Natural disasters include, but are not limited to, seismic activity capable of destroying cities, volcanic eruptions that can alter global climate patterns, massive storm systems with winds exceeding 200 kilometers per hour, electromagnetic disturbances that can disable unshielded electronics, and radiation exposure from the planet's own star. "The galaxy thinks our world is trying to kill us," Day observed calmly. "They are correct. Earth has been attempting to eliminate human life for millions of years. The fact that we not only survived but thrived has shaped everything about our species. That is why we are the only civilization that builds ships expecting to be shot, stabbed, burned, frozen, irradiated, and blown up, and still keeps fighting." Across the growing fleet, similar conversations were taking place as human commanders prepared for their first major interstellar conflict. On the massive carrier Busan Rising, Wing Commander Yu Jin-ah was briefing her fighter pilots on Reaver combat tactics. The enemy fighters were fast and deadly, but they had never faced pilots who had learned to fly in atmospheric conditions that would ground most galactic aircraft. "Remember," Jinnah told her squadron leaders, "these machines have been fighting aliens who evolved in safe, controlled environments. Their pilots learned to fly in atmospheres thinner than mountaintop air and gravity so weak they could bounce around like children. We learned to fly in storms that could tear apart their best fighters, in gravity that would crush their bones, breathing air that would poison them in minutes." Lieutenant Commander Song Min-ho raised his hand from the back of the briefing room. "Ma'am, intelligence reports suggest these Reaver fighters can operate in temperature extremes that would disable most galactic vessels. How do we counter that advantage?" Jinnah activated a holographic display showing a standard human fighter craft. "Lieutenant Commander, our fighters are designed to operate everywhere from the upper atmosphere of Venus to the ice fields of Europa. We build our machines to function in environments where most aliens would die simply from exposure. Temperature extremes are not an advantage against us, they are just another variable to account for." Meanwhile, in the engine room of the heavy cruiser Incheon's Shield, Chief Engineer Nam Woo-bin was running final diagnostics on systems that would have seemed like military secrets to most galactic civilizations. The human approach to starship engineering was radically different from standard galactic practice, shaped by centuries of operating in conditions that most species considered impossible. "Chief, the thermal management system is showing green across all boards," reported engineering specialist Kim Yoo-jin. "We can operate at full combat power even if external temperatures reach 3,000 degrees Kelvin." "Good," Woo-bin replied, as he checked the readings himself. "These Reavers seem to rely on heat-based weapons that overwhelm enemy cooling systems. They have probably never encountered ships designed to operate inside stellar coronas or the thermal updrafts of volcanic worlds. The truth was that human starship design philosophy had been shaped by Earth's hostile environment from the very beginning." Early space explorers had learned to build vessels that could survive re-entry through an atmosphere that would strip most alien ships down to their component atoms. They had created life support systems that could function in the vacuum of space or the crushing depths of ocean trenches. Every human ship was essentially a mobile piece of Earth's deadly environment, carrying with it the lessons learned from surviving on a world that killed the weak and unprepared. On the command deck of the dreadnought Gwangju's Hammer, Captain Cho Soo-young was reviewing ammunition loadouts with her weapons officer. The human approach to space combat was as unique as their engineering philosophy, shaped by fighting wars on a world where the environment itself was often more dangerous than any enemy. Captain, we have full loads of kinetic penetrators, plasma, charges, and fusion warheads, reported weapons officer Bae Jun-soo. Intelligence suggests the Reavers have proven immune to most energy-based weapons used by galactic forces. Then we will use what has always worked for humans, Soo-young replied. When sophisticated weapons fail, we throw rocks. Very fast, very heavy rocks. The human preference for kinetic weapons was another result of Earth's influence on their development. On a world where the weather could generate electromagnetic pulses that disabled electronics, where volcanic activity could interfere with energy weapons, and where simple mechanical reliability often meant the difference between life and death, humans had learned to appreciate the elegance of putting solid objects through their enemies at extremely high velocities. As the fleet continued to assemble, Admiral Hwan moved between ships via shuttle, personally briefing his senior commanders on the tactical situation. The Reavers were indeed a formidable enemy, but Hwan had spent his entire career fighting opponents who had advantages that seemed insurmountable. The key factor, he explained to a gathering of ship captains aboard his flagship, is that these machines have adapted to fighting aliens who evolved in paradise. Every species they have encountered developed on worlds with stable climates, abundant resources, and minimal environmental threats. Their combat doctrine assumes enemies who will retreat when faced with overwhelming force, who value individual survival over mission accomplishment, and who become ineffective when removed from their optimal operating conditions. Captain Park, So-young of the destroyer Daegu's Vengeance, spoke up from her position near the tactical display. Admiral, what makes us different? Why should we expect better results than civilizations with thousands of years more combat experience? Hwan activated a holographic representation of Earth that slowly rotated in the center of the briefing room. To most galactic species, the image would have looked like a vision of hell, a world of violent storms, active volcanoes, crushing gravity, and atmospheric conditions that could kill in seconds. Captain, most species see this and think we are insane for calling it home, Hwan said quietly. They cannot understand how any intelligent life could evolve in such conditions. What they fail to realize is that Earth did not make us insane. It made us human. Every day of our existence has been spent fighting a world that actively tries to kill us. We learned to make war not against other species, but against reality itself. The truth of Admiral Hwan's words became apparent as the last ships of the human fleet arrived at the rally point. 312 capital ships of various classes, each one designed to operate in conditions that would destroy most galactic vessels. 800 escort craft built for speed and firepower rather than comfort or efficiency. Supply ships that could function in any environment where humans could survive, which was to say almost anywhere. Dr. Han Yu-jin, the fleet's chief medical officer aboard the hospital ship Busan's Hope, was perhaps the person who best understood what made humans unique in galactic terms. Her medical bay was equipped to handle injuries and conditions that most alien doctors had never encountered, simply because no other species regularly operated in environments dangerous enough to cause such trauma. The Reavers have been fighting enemies whose idea of extreme environmental exposure is a slight variation in atmospheric pressure, she noted while reviewing casualty projections. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Veilthar system with the precision of a military operation that had been practiced countless times in the hostile environments around Earth. Captain Lee Day watched from the bridge of Sol's Fury as 300 human warships materialized in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming dully in the light of the distant star. Around them, the wreckage of previous battles drifted silently through space, testament to the Reavers' devastating effectiveness against galactic forces. "Sensor sweep complete, Captain," reported Lieutenant Cho Min-soo from his position at the tactical station. detecting massive Reaver presence throughout the system. Current count shows approximately 1,000 mechanical vessels of various configurations. They appear to be in the process of dismantling the fourth planet in the system. On the main display, the crew of Sol's Fury could see the Reavers at work. The machines moved with terrifying efficiency, their ships stripping away layers of planetary crust and feeding the raw materials into mobile factories that produced more Reaver units. It was industrialized destruction on a scale that no galactic civilization had ever imagined possible. "Distance to SciFiPrime?" Day asked calmly, showing none of the fear that would have been natural for most species facing such overwhelming odds. "Approximately 6 astronomical units, sir," Minsu replied. "The planet appears to be under active siege. We are detecting multiple orbital defense platforms, but their energy signatures are failing." From the Vilthani orbital stations around their homeworld, Ambassador Kale watched in growing despair as the human fleet appeared on his sensors. The brave aliens had come as promised, but surely even these mysterious Deathworlders could not stand against the mechanical horde that had crushed every previous attempt at resistance. "Ambassador," called Technician Vel from his monitoring station, "the Reaver forces are redirecting their fleet elements toward the human positions. They appear to be treating this as a standard response to alien intervention." Kale activated his communication systems to warn the humans of what they were about to face. "Human Admiral Juan, this is Ambassador Kyle of SciFiPrime. The Reavers are moving to intercept your forces with approximately 500 vessels. Their weapons generate thermal outputs exceeding 4,000 degrees Kelvin. Please consider immediate withdrawal before—" Admiral Juan's voice cut through the transmission with calm authority. "Ambassador Kyle, thank you for the tactical information. All human vessels, prepare for standard engagement protocols. This is what we came here to do." The Reavers moved with mechanical precision toward the human fleet, their sensors analyzing the newcomers according to patterns established through dozens of previous encounters with galactic forces. The machines expected to face enemies who would attempt to maintain distance, who would rely primarily on energy weapons, and who would break formation when subjected to overwhelming firepower. Instead, they encountered something unprecedented in their experience. The human ships accelerated directly toward the approaching Reaver fleet, closing distance rather than attempting to maintain range for long-distance bombardment. It was a tactical decision that seemed suicidal to any observer familiar with standard galactic combat doctrine. "Contact in 30 seconds, announced Lieutenant Cho Min-soo as the opposing fleets raced toward each other at combined velocities that would have been considered reckless by most species. Reaver forces are charging their primary weapons. Energy readings indicate plasma discharge capabilities at 4,200 degrees Kelvin. On most alien bridges, this announcement would have triggered immediate panic. The Vilthani, watching from their orbital platforms, fully expected to witness the destruction of humanity's would-be saviors within moments of first contact. The thermal output of Reaver weapons had proven sufficient to overwhelm the cooling systems of every previous enemy, turning their crews into vapor and their ships into drifting hulks. Captain Day's response was to activate the fleet-wide communication system and issue orders that would have seemed insane to any galactic military commander. "All ships, activate thermal shielding and prepare for close-quarters engagement. Remember, we trained for this in the solar corona exercises. Standard Earth operating temperatures apply." The human ships drove straight into the Reaver weapon discharges as the mechanical forces opened fire with their devastating plasma arrays. The space between the fleets became a hellscape of superheated energy that would have instantly killed any galactic crew simply through proximity exposure. Instead of the expected destruction, something remarkable happened. The human vessels flew directly through the plasma streams without slowing down. Their hulls, designed to withstand atmospheric re-entry through Earth's dense atmosphere at orbital velocities, absorbed thermal punishment that would have vaporized ships built for the gentle environments of most galactic worlds. Their crews evolved from organisms that had learned to survive in environments ranging from Arctic tundra to volcanic regions, barely registered temperature spikes that would have cooked alien sailors alive. Hull temperature rising to within acceptable parameters, reported Chief Engineer Nam Wubin from his position in Sol's Fury's engine room. All systems functioning normally. Thermal management systems operating at 60% of maximum capacity. The casual nature of this report would have shocked any galactic observer. Humans were treating weapon impacts that had destroyed entire alien fleets as minor inconveniences requiring routine system monitoring. "Return fire," Captain Day ordered with the same tone he might have used to request a status update. The human response was devastating in its simplicity. While other galactic species had attempted to match the Reavers' advanced energy weapons with increasingly sophisticated technology, humans brought something far more primitive and infinitely more effective. The human fleet opened fire with kinetic weapons, solid projectiles accelerated to significant fractions of light speed by magnetic acceleration systems. The Reavers had adapted their defensive systems to counter energy weapons, plasma cannons, particle beams, and other sophisticated armaments used by galactic civilizations. They had no effective countermeasures against what amounted to very fast rocks, thrown with extraordinary precision and devastating force. Commander Park So-young of the destroyer, Guangzhou's Hammer, watched through her tactical display as her ships, railgun rounds punched through 3 Reaver vessels in a single salvo. The solid projectiles, moving at relativistic velocities, simply ignored the enemy's defensive measures and tore through their hulls like they were constructed from fragile crystal. "Direct hits on targets 7, 12, and 15, reported her weapons officer with satisfaction. "Target destruction confirmed. Acquiring next firing solution." Across the human fleet, similar scenes played out as kinetic weapons proved devastatingly effective against enemies who had never encountered such primitive yet brutally efficient firepower. The Reavers, accustomed to fighting species who relied on sophisticated technology, found themselves helpless against weapons that operated according to the simple principle of putting solid objects through their targets at extremely high velocities. Wing. Commander Yu Jina led her fighter squadrons into the heart of the Reaver formation, her pilots flying maneuvers that would have been impossible for most galactic species. Human fighters designed to operate in Earth's violent atmospheric conditions proved capable of acceleration and directional changes that overwhelmed Reaver targeting systems calibrated for aliens with much more fragile physiological tolerances. "Blue Squadron, break and attack," Jina commanded as her formation split apart to engage individual Reaver fighters. "Remember, these machines have never fought anyone who learned to fly in hurricane force winds and electromagnetic interference." Human pilots attacked with a combination of reckless courage and calculated precision that left their mechanical opponents struggling to adapt. Reaver fighters, designed to overwhelm enemies through superior speed and firepower, found themselves outmaneuvered by pilots who had learned their craft in atmospheric conditions that would have been fatal to most galactic aviators. Lieutenant Minho rolled his fighter through a plasma burst that would have disabled most alien craft, the extreme temperature causing only minor fluctuations in his systems designed to operate in environments ranging from Arctic cold to near-stellar heat. His return fire, a burst of solid projectiles from his fighter's kinetic cannon, tore through the Reaver's hull and detonated its power core. "Splash, 1 Reaver fighter," Minho reported calmly. "These things are tough, but they do not seem to know how to handle pilots who are not afraid of a little turbulence." On the Vilthani observation platforms, Ambassador Kale watched in amazement as the battle unfolded in ways that defied every previous encounter with the Reavers. The mechanical forces that had swept aside galactic fleets with contemptuous ease were being systematically destroyed by humans who seemed to treat deadly combat as routine operational procedure. "Technician Vel," Kale called to his monitoring station. "Are you certain these readings are accurate? The human vessels appear to be operating normally despite thermal exposure that should have destroyed them completely. The Reavers were machines designed for adaptation and learning, their artificial intelligence systems constantly analyzing enemy tactics and developing countermeasures based on observed patterns. As the battle progressed and their losses mounted, the mechanical forces began implementing changes to their combat doctrine that had proven effective against every previous galactic opponent they had encountered. Instead of continuing to engage the human fleet in direct ship-to-ship combat, where their usual advantages had proven ineffective, the Reavers shifted to boarding tactics. Their combat doctrine indicated that while these strange new enemies possessed unexpectedly resilient ships, the organic crews inside would surely prove as vulnerable as all other galactic species when faced with direct assault by mechanical infantry. Master Sergeant Bei Junho stood in the cargo bay of the heavy cruiser Daegu's Vengeance, watching his tactical display as multiple Reaver boarding pods accelerated toward human vessels throughout the fleet. The machines had clearly decided that if they could not destroy human ships from the outside, they would tear apart the crews from within using their standard boarding protocols. "Listen up, Marines. Junho announced to his squad as they took positions behind hastily constructed barricades. Intelligence reports suggest these machines are used to fighting species that evolved in safe, controlled environments. They expect to find panicked, fragile organics cowering behind environmental suits and hoping for rescue. Private Kim Soo-jin checked her armor's environmental seals while ensuring her rifle was loaded with armor-piercing rounds designed for close-quarters combat in hostile environments. Sergeant, what exactly are we dealing with here? The briefing. Materials were pretty vague about Reaver infantry capabilities. According to the data from previous engagements, Junho replied while reviewing his own weapon systems, these things are designed to cut through standard galactic hull materials using plasma torches and then eliminate enemy crews using a combination of cutting tools and energy weapons. They expect their opponents to be unable to function in vacuum conditions and to panic when faced with superior mechanical strength. The first Reaver boarding pod impacted against Daigu's Vengeance's hull, with enough force to shake the entire ship. The mechanical assault craft immediately began cutting through the outer armor using plasma torches that generated temperatures sufficient to melt most galactic hull materials like soft butter. Contact in 30 seconds, Junho reported to the bridge while his Marines prepared for combat. Remember, these things have been terrorizing the galaxy by fighting enemies who spent their entire evolutionary history in paradise. We spent hours dodging predators that could bench press a hover car. The Reavers cut through the hull plating and poured into the cargo bay, their sleek mechanical forms bristling with cutting tools and energy weapons designed to overwhelm the soft, vulnerable crews that operated most galactic vessels. The machines moved with perfect coordination, their sensors scanning for the environmental suits and defensive positions that characterized previous boarding actions. Instead, they found humans who had spent their entire evolutionary history learning to fight things bigger, stronger, and more dangerous than themselves. Private Kim Soo-jin put 3 armor-piercing rounds through the central processor of the first Reaver to fully enter the cargo bay, her shots placed with the precision that came from growing up on a world where missing your target meant becoming something else's dinner. Corporal Lee Jae-min demonstrated another uniquely human approach to close-quarters combat by using his monomolecular combat knife to pry open a Reaver's chest plate and stuff an anti-personnel grenade inside the mechanical torso. The resulting explosion destroyed not only the target, but 2 additional machines that had been moving in formation behind it. These things are built tough, but they do not know how to handle enemies who are not afraid of them, Jamin observed while reloading his rifle and looking for his next target. The Reavers had designed their boarding tactics around the assumption that organic opponents would be terrified by superior mechanical strength and would attempt to maintain distance while relying on ranged weapons for defense. Human Marines, products of a world where survival often required getting dangerously close to things that could kill you, responded by charging directly into melee range and using everything from combat knives to improvised weapons. Sergeant Park. Dongjun grabbed a piece of deck plating that had been torn loose during the boarding action and used it as a shield while closing distance with a Reaver that was attempting to establish a firing position. When he reached melee range, he abandoned the improvised shield and used a plasma torch taken from a destroyed machine to cut through the enemy's arm joints before finishing it off with his sidearm. Boarding party eliminated, Master Sergeant. Junho reported to the bridge with the same tone he might have used to announce the completion of routine maintenance, requesting permission to return the favor. Similar scenes played out across the human fleet as Reaver boarding parties encountered defenders who refused to behave according to established galactic patterns. On the battleship Soul's Fury, Lieutenant Commander Song Yu-jin led a squad of engineers in repelling boarders using improvised weapons created from maintenance equipment and spare parts. Remember, Yu-jin told her team as they prepared to engage Reavers who had breached the engine room, these machines expect us to be helpless without our advanced technology. Show them what humans can do with a wrench and some spare wire, the Sci. Reavers that invaded Soul's Fury's engine room found themselves facing opponents who used everything from plasma cutters to gravity wrenches as weapons, turning routine maintenance equipment into instruments of destruction with the creativity that came from spending millions of years making tools work in environments that actively tried to destroy them. Chief Petty Officer Nam Sung-ho trapped 2 Reavers in a maintenance shaft and then used the ship's emergency venting system to expose them to hard vacuum and extreme cold, conditions that would have killed most galactic species but were simply another environmental hazard to humans who routinely worked in similar conditions. The true shock to the Reaver systems came when human crews began launching counter-boarding operations against mechanical vessels. On the assault ship Gwangju's Fury, Captain Oh Min-jung led a boarding party that cut through a Reaver hull using nothing more sophisticated than shaped charges and determination. "Standard breach and clear," Min-jung announced to her team as they prepared to enter the mechanical vessel. Remember, these machines have never faced enemies who consider hard vacuum a minor inconvenience. The human boarding party moved through the Reaver ship with efficient brutality, their powered armor, allowing them to function normally in environments that would have been instantly fatal to most galactic species. They used kinetic weapons to destroy critical systems and placed explosive charges with the precision that came from extensive training in hostile environment operations. What truly alarmed the Reaver artificial intelligence systems was the human approach to dealing with mechanical opponents. Instead of attempting to match superior technology with more advanced equipment, humans simply used whatever was available to achieve their objectives. Maintenance tools became weapons, emergency equipment became tactical assets, and standard operating procedures became combat advantages. Lieutenant Park Bo-young led a team of technicians in taking control of a Reaver manufacturing ship by the simple expedient of cutting through critical power conduits with tools designed for routine electrical work. When the machines attempted to stop them using internal security systems, the humans responded by rerouting power through improvised connections that turned the ship's own defensive measures against its mechanical crew. "Engineering secured," Bo-young reported as her team finished placing demolition charges throughout the manufacturing vessel. These things build impressive equipment, but they do not seem to understand the concept of improvised solutions. The Reavers found themselves facing opponents who treated superior technology as simply another obstacle to overcome, rather than an insurmountable advantage. Human crews demonstrated a talent for adaptation and improvisation that seemed to match or exceed the machine's own learning capabilities, turning every encounter into a lesson in creative problem-solving under extreme pressure. On the command ship of the Reaver fleet, artificial intelligence systems struggled to process the unexpected results of their boarding operations. Every previous encounter with galactic species had followed predictable patterns. Organic crews would be overwhelmed by mechanical superiority, ships would be captured or destroyed, and resistance would collapse when faced with obviously superior force. Instead, the machines found themselves losing boarding actions to enemies who seemed to treat deadly combat as routine operational procedure. Human crews not only repelled boarding parties, but actively pursued counterattacks that resulted in the capture or destruction of Reaver vessels. Dr. Han Yu-jin, working in the medical bay of the hospital ship Busan's Hope, found herself treating injuries that would have been fatal to most galactic species, but were considered routine combat wounds by human standards. Plasma burns that would have killed aliens were treated as minor inconveniences. 72 hours after the first human ships had dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Velthar system, Admiral Kim Hwan stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the last Reaver vessel explode in a brilliant flash of released energy. The mechanical fleet that had terrorized an entire sector of the galaxy for months was now nothing more than drifting debris scattered across the star system like the remains of some cosmic graveyard. "Final enemy vessel destroyed," reported Captain Lee Day from his position aboard Sol's Fury. "All Reaver forces in the system have been eliminated. We are detecting no remaining hostile signatures." The human fleet hung in space around Valthar, prime like a protective barrier, their hulls scarred by battle but their crews victorious in humanity's first major interstellar conflict. Around them, the grateful survivors of a dozen alien species transmitted messages of thanks and disbelief from their orbital stations and refugee ships. "Admiral Huan," came the telepathic voice of Ambassador Kyle, his mental words carrying emotions that would have been impossible to express in any spoken language. "On behalf of the Velthani people and all the worlds that have been saved by your actions, I offer our deepest gratitude. You have accomplished what our combined fleets could not, what our greatest military minds declared impossible. The communication channels were flooded with similar messages from across the galaxy as news of the human victory spread through subspace networks. The Lumerian Collective was offering permanent medical exchanges and access to their most advanced healing technologies. The Depths Dweller Commonwealth proposed joint exploration missions to regions of space too dangerous for most species to attempt. The Andraxian Empire, humbled by their own failure against the Reavers, was requesting detailed tactical analyses of human combat methods. Most significantly, the Galactic Council itself was transmitting an unprecedented offer of full membership and senior advisory status for humanity, recognizing Earth as a major power capable of protecting galactic civilization from threats that had seemed insurmountable. Counselor Zeth, the same insectoid who had questioned human capabilities just days earlier, sent a private communication directly to Admiral Juan. The message carried undertones of respect that had been completely absent from their previous interaction. Admiral, I must confess that my species has gravely underestimated humanity, Zeth transmitted. Your victory against the Reavers defies every tactical principle we thought we understood. I must ask, for the benefit of galactic military doctrine, how did you accomplish what our combined forces could not? How did your species succeed where civilizations with millennia of experience failed? Juan stood at the observation deck of his ship, looking out at the stars and thinking about the blue-green world that had shaped humanity's approach to survival and conflict. Earth hung in his memory like a jewel made of storms and fire, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. Counselor, Juan replied carefully, the difference is not in our technology or our numbers. The difference is in our expectations. You asked for aid from species capable of surviving extreme combat conditions, and that is exactly what you received. He paused, considering how to explain concepts that seemed obvious to humans, but were apparently revolutionary to most galactic civilizations. The problem with most species in this galaxy is that you evolved on worlds that wanted you to live. Your planets provided stable climates, abundant resources, and environments that supported life rather than constantly threatening it. You developed technology to make life easier and more comfortable. Captain Lee Day joined Admiral Juan at the observation window, his own scarred face reflecting similar thoughts about their violent homeworld. Earth spent 4 billion years trying to kill everything on it, Day added to the conversation. Volcanic eruptions that could alter global climate, ice ages that lasted for millennia, asteroid impacts that wiped out entire forms of life, predators that were faster, stronger, and more deadly than anything our ancestors could match. We are what survived, Juan continued. Every aspect of human civilization, from our technology to our military doctrine, to our basic psychology, has been shaped by the need to function effectively in conditions that would kill most galactic species simply through exposure. Dr. Han Yu-jin, monitoring the conversation from her medical bay, added her own perspective on what made humans unique, in galactic terms. I have been treating combat injuries that would be considered automatically fatal by most alien medical standards. Burns, radiation exposure, mechanical trauma, decompression damage. To humans, these are routine occupational hazards that we plan for and expect to encounter. The truth was becoming clear to galactic observers who had dismissed humanity as a young and inexperienced species. Humans did not fight like other civilizations because they were not like other civilizations. Where most species sought to avoid danger and minimize risk, humans had learned to embrace hazardous conditions as normal operating environments. Lieutenant Commander Song Min-ho, leading a damage assessment team aboard the captured Reaver manufacturing ship, transmitted his findings to the Fleet Command. Admiral, we have completed our analysis of Reaver technology and tactical doctrine. These machines were specifically designed to counter every combat method used by known galactic civilizations. Their adaptive protocols included countermeasures for energy weapons, defensive strategies for long-range combat, and boarding tactics optimized for enemies who could not function in hostile environments. What they did not account for, added Chief Engineer Nam Woo-bin from his position in the captured vessel's control center, was opponents who prefer close-range combat, who use kinetic weapons as primary armaments, and who consider hard vacuum and extreme temperatures to be minor environmental variables rather than tactical obstacles. The Reavers had been defeated not by superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but by encountering enemies who operated according to completely different assumptions about what constituted survivable conditions. Human crews treated as routine, operational parameters, environmental factors that would have been immediately fatal to most galactic species. Captain Park So-young, reviewing the tactical recordings from her destroyer Gwangju's hammer, noted the pattern that had emerged throughout the battle. Every time the Reavers adapted their tactics to counter our methods, we simply changed our approach in ways they could not predict. When they strengthened their hulls against kinetic weapons, we used boarding actions. When they improved their anti-boarding defenses, we used environmental warfare. They could not adapt fast enough because they did not understand that humans consider adaptation to hostile conditions to be a basic survival skill. Wing Commander Yu Jin-ah, conducting post-battle interviews with her fighter pilots, discovered similar patterns in small craft combat. The Reaver fighters were designed to outmaneuver enemies who had learned to fly in gentle, controlled conditions. Our pilots learned their skills in atmospheric turbulence that would have destroyed most galactic aircraft. When the machines tried to use speed and agility as advantages, they found themselves outmaneuvered by humans who considered hurricane-force winds and electromagnetic interference to be normal flying conditions. As the human fleet began organizing, salvage operations and preparing for the journey home, the broader implications of their victory became apparent to galactic civilization. For the first time in recorded history, a single species had demonstrated the ability to defeat a threat that had seemed capable of consuming the entire galaxy. More importantly, they had done so using methods that revealed fundamental gaps in galactic understanding of warfare and survival. Human success had not come from advanced technology or numerical superiority, but from approaching problems with assumptions shaped by evolution on a world that had never stopped trying to kill them. Commander Oh Dong-wook, coordinating the engineering. Teams that were studying captured Reaver technology made the observation that would define humanity's role in galactic civilization for generations to come. These machines represented the ultimate expression of adaptive combat technology, capable of countering any threat they encountered. The only thing they could not adapt to was enemies who had spent their entire evolutionary history adapting to threats that made warfare look like a recreational activity. Admiral Huan received one final communication before ordering the fleet to prepare for departure. Ambassador Kale, speaking for the entire Galactic Council, transmitted an offer that would forever change humanity's place in the galaxy. Admiral, the Council has voted unanimously to offer Earth full membership with senior advisory status in all matters relating to galactic defense. We recognize that your species possesses capabilities that are essential for protecting our civilization from threats we cannot face alone. Huan considered the offer while looking out at stars that no longer seemed quite so hostile now that humanity had proven its ability to fight for them. Ambassador, we accept your offer, with one condition. When the next impossible threat appears, when the next enemy emerges that seems too powerful to defeat, remember what you learned here. Do not ask us how many ships we need. Ask us how many ships you want us to bring. The human fleet jumped to hyperspace.